The favorite part of my job is the reason that I got into management in the first place. I really, really enjoy finding what works for each person on my team and finding ways to encourage and inspire them and bring them either along on their growth, journey professionally, or kind of like recognize something in them that maybe they don't see. Like all of those intricacies that come with managing creatives is a real joy. And I think it's something that I have found a great love in.
In this episode of the Creative Debrief, I sit down with Nick Priest, who is a creative manager of copy and design at GE Healthcare. And Nick talks about his leadership philosophies, from vulnerability and empathy to servant leadership. He also has some excellent advice to share with creatives who are struggling in their careers or who may be dealing with a lot of self-doubt right now. It was an absolutely wonderful conversation, and I'm super excited to share it with you today. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I have Nick Priest with me today. Nick, will you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I am a Pisces. I like long walks on the beach. No, I'm kidding. Well, I'm not. I am a Pisces, but no, I am. I am a creative manager for a content and design team within the Surgical Innovations subsegment of GE Healthcare, which is super exciting. I've been there for a couple of years, and I lead a team of creatives, which is pretty awesome.
So tell us what your favorite part about your job is.
The favorite part of my job, I think that the favorite part of my job is the reason that I got into management in the first place. I really waffled around the idea of wanting to become a manager, right? Because the biggest point of separation is the doing of the work versus leading the people who do the work. And I really, really enjoy finding what works for each person on my team and finding ways to encourage and inspire them, to get them to create those points of cross connection and bring them either along on their growth journey professionally, or kind of like recognize something in them that maybe they don't see. Like all of those intricacies that come with managing creatives is a real joy. And I think it's something that I have found a great love in, and it helps when I'm being forced to do budgets, which I hate to do. So it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of mental energy, right, to get creatives to really push themselves. But yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing.
I love that. I think that's one of the things about it that appeals to me too. So I can appreciate that. So what would you say, you talked about like sometimes it can be challenging or exhausting. So what's something that gives you energy, or how do you keep your energy up?
Yeah. Keeping my energy up, is for me, it's really about like leaning into escapism. I need to kind of like constantly be recharging my own battery, whether it's, taking time to, dive into a good book, work out in the garden, honestly, even like engaging in heady conversations with my kids can be like a really recharging, create it fuels the creative tank. It kind of gives me a chance to reset and take things from a different perspective. I love doing that. And then of course, like I will fall down, rabbit holes like anybody else, right? And find myself doing unnecessary research on things, or working on side, home projects or whatever. So honestly, anything that's not doing the work, I find a way to recharge, in that way. In my in my in my spare time, I also am an elected official in my town, and I really find that to be somehow recharging. I know it sounds odd. It's like, oh, he does a volunteer part-time job. How is that like a recharging exercise? But it's the idea of stepping into a completely different space, right? And getting a chance to like dive in and focus on something that ultimately leads to hopefully the betterment of the community is a great way to like just step away from the work that I plug into on the 9 to 5 and, connect with other community members and just, keep that tank full.
Yeah, I think there's actually a ton of value in getting involved in your community and finding some outlet or some way to give back to your community. I think there's a lot that you can get out of that. So I think that's really cool. What would you say is something that you really enjoy, especially about leading creatives?
I love I love when they surprise me. I love when they challenge me. I I was always kind of taught never be the smartest person in the room. And I really take that to heart, right? Is to surround yourself with people who in one way, shape, or form are smarter than you. Because intrinsically you are going to get smarter by being around those people. And I I love when, I say something and my team feels safe enough to be like, is it though? And, and that's said with absolute respect. And, we have great conversations, right? Like, yes, challenge me, challenge the idea, right? Push, right? Like that's part of being a creative is, looking at the thing and going, "Oh, is this right? Is there an opportunity to make this better, to make this more engaging, to really push that boundary and create something that is going to affect the space that we're in, right?" And when they find that in themselves and they're in that safe space and they unlock that, I love it.
Hmm. That's cool. I love that too. I think that for me, being able to watch people or provide a safe place for people to have that kind of conversation or that kind of discourse, I think is really, really nice. Um, what would you say is an experience or some experiences that have shaped you the most as a professional or in your career?
So I would say, like any person who's come up through the ranks of being a creative, right? So I come from the copy side, and I think we've all taken enough hits during the development of any project, right? Which absolutely gives us so much insight into how we operate, and how we can make ourselves better. I've learned so much just doing the job, about how to be a better writer, about how to think, in different ways, about how to listen to a client and understand, what they're actually asking for when they say certain things, right? And about getting them to align to that thing, right? When a client says, "Hey, make this pop more," right? They're having a reaction that they don't know how to communicate, and how do we like, it's our job as the creative to say, okay, so what I'm hearing is this, so if I did this or we approach it from this perspective, would that, reach the end goal that you have up here, right? And there's one thing I've learned through this experience, it's that people who aren't creative, and who don't work in the creative space, right? Because I don't want to say you can't be creative and not be a creative, right? I think they're two halves of the same coin. But I think that, like, people don't know how to unlock that piece of themselves, and they don't know how to communicate it. And I think, like, you see that on the spectrum of clients when you say, "Oh my god, this client's amazing," they totally get it, right? Is that you found somebody who's closer to you in that the way that their brain functions, and they do get it, versus a client who needs a thing, doesn't quite get it, and that's okay. It's not their job to get it necessarily. That's our job. But helping them unlock it. And I think, like, that's a great general, like, life lesson as a creative. Like I said earlier, I think making sure you're not the smartest person in the room. It's never about being the smartest person in the room. Be the dumbest person. Ask stupid questions, right? And don't be afraid of asking stupid questions, because there's probably someone in the room who also is afraid to ask that question. Create that clarification for yourself and for your colleagues. I think is great. And then for the love of God, I think that this is so important, is listening, right? I think so many people are so eager to move, right? Okay, yeah, you want that written? I'll write that, right? They're not listening, right? Active listening is so crucial to the creative process and to making sure that we fully understand what's expected of us, and then being able to properly create that thing. Oftentimes in my career, people would say, or they would wait. I remember, working at one agency, and people would ask their questions, and I would sit and listen to all the questions, write, take my notes, right, taking copious notes, and then the room would quiet, and then I would look up from my notes, and whoever was giving the presentation or walking through the brief or whatever it was is looking at me, right, and they're like, "Go ahead." One time I was like, what do you mean, go ahead? And this particular creative director was like, I know you've got things that you want to ask and say. I've been waiting for you to open your mouth, and they didn't mean it in a bad way at all. They absolutely meant it in an endearing way, but it's what's the point in me asking the same question that someone asked 5 seconds ago, right? Unless I'm asking a clarifying question. Like, let the group be a part of that experience, right? If you're always the kid raising your hand in the front of the room, you're never gaining anything from your peers who have so much to teach you. So I think like those are like some key things that I've really taken away from my career. I think if I could offer any other pieces of advice, I would say slow down, right? Like, I think that the world is trying to move too fast, and I think that we are running clean over good ideas in the name of a deadline. We aren't building time into our timelines, into our processes, to stop and actually think, to make sure that what we're creating is right. And it's the difference between creating good work and creating what an old creative director of mine used to call gack, right? It's like, I remember he's like, oh great, it's just a piece of gack, just make it that's what the client wants. And I'm like, what the hell is gack? And he's like, gack is a thing you make when someone wants a thing and you have no power to shape that idea. It's just a piece to say we made a thing. It's a widget. And I'm like, oh, that's really great. So now in my role, I'm constantly saying to my team and saying to my stakeholders and saying to my business partners, I'm saying, hey, why do you what purpose does this thing serve? Right? What is the intent that you're trying to achieve? Right? And oftentimes people will be able to answer the question because they've thought it through, or they know what goal they're trying to achieve, with this. And maybe, that's where the conversation opens up, and you can talk about, well, maybe it's not a postcard, maybe it's a this, right? Or give us a chance to think about it, and we can come back with some ideas, right? Like, you get them to open up in that space. But sometimes they come to you and they're like, just need a thing. And I often say to my team, I'm like, don't be afraid to question that, right? Because that's time, that's resources, that's energy that you're spending on something. And if that thing serves no real purpose, then why are we bringing it into this world, right? I'd rather see people's time, energy, effort be spent into things that are going to further outcomes, right? And when you work in the healthcare vertical, that's so important, right? I spent a big chunk of my career working in rare disease, right? Where if I'm working on a brand, right, and this is my baby, my audience pool is 2,000 people, parents and patients alike, right? You got to make that work sing. Those are people who need an answer, and I think that can apply to any size audience, right? And it's where you see successful brands connect and unsuccessful brands not. So, yeah, that's a little rambling from me, but
Oh, good. I think that so you said something that was really interesting to me. You're talking about I guess we've already mentioned this, but creating a safe space. I love that you do that. Like you see the value in that and the necessity in creating a safe space to ask questions. There are no stupid questions, and I think that if we create a culture around asking questions being a stupid thing to do, then I think that we end up hobbling ourselves and our creativity and our ability to reach goals effectively and efficiently. Going back to the team again, and I'm just kind of curious. You've talked about this a little bit, but what are the things that you do to encourage your team members to, for example, reach their creative potentials, or maybe just feel a little bit more sure and or confident in what they're doing?
Yeah, this is one of those things where I don't think that there's a clean answer because everybody's different, and what works for one person will not work for another. But I think that there are some basic things that you can really use to make sure folks feel supported, right? And I think that that is some things I actually already talked about, which is, as a manager, make sure you are actively listening, not just trying to get them to do what you want them to do, right? I always try and like put everything down and pay attention to the person that is talking to me, right? I really believe in the notion of servant leadership, right? Is that I'm here for my employees, for my team, right? And the only way they get better is when I push them and when they push themselves, right? So, how do you get someone to push themselves? So, actively listening is super, super important. What I found really works well is for creatives, right? So, as creatives, I think that we all have this certain level of oppositional defiance. I think it's just kind of a part of who we are. When someone's like, hey, do it this way, you're like, I don't want to do it that way. I did it this way for a reason, and I have reasons for why I did it. And don't tell me to do it that way, right? Like we naturally want to, create that friction and defend the thing that we've created, which is great because that means that we've poured a piece of ourselves into the work. But to the same end, when you are providing feedback to your creatives, right? I think it's so, so important to say, hey, this was great. I'm going to make some suggestions here, and I want you to take a look at it. I keep my first, even sometimes second round level feedback high level, right? It's, hey, like when we think about this, does this area really ladder back to the brief? And hey, when we're looking at this, does this really hit on the tone of what we're trying to achieve? And what if we tried something like this? Or maybe, hey, could you explain why you took it in this direction? And I think that that gives a creative the opportunity to create more. It's disarming, right? Because I'm not coming in and saying, no, 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 you got to make changes, right? It's a way to have a conversation and then just get them to think differently about the thing that is put in front of them. Because oftentimes, right, we'll create a thing and the client goes, no, 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 do it this way, because they have a certain expectation in their mind about what they want the thing to be. And I think that it's crucial for creatives to be challenged in that safe space through those suggestions by someone who's there to support and grow them versus having to get kicked in the teeth when they least expect it. So I'm really big on that. And I think that having someone like rehearse a little bit also helps, right? So it's like, hey, this is I took a look at the presentation you put together. It's great. Before you run it through with me, I want you to talk it out loud to the mirror and hear yourself say the words, right? Because again, many times we think the thing that we've done makes sense, and it takes sometimes it takes a village to be able to step back and see what it is how what we're saying isn't going to make the connective leap to the person that we're talking to. I think those are some like really like big picture things that I always try and use, but I also approach everything very vulnerably. I tell my team all the time, I'm like, mistakes are totally okay. We all make mistakes, right? The trick is in how we learn from those mistakes. And I'm not perfect, and you will probably have an idea that's better than mine, and I don't care. It's fantastic. Building that safe space is about, showing them that you're not there to put your stamp on everything, because for me, that's not what the work is about. The work is about meeting the goal of the brief and bringing that thing to life, not about me making sure that I got the headline in, or that, to me, none of that matters, right? I'm the first person to, and this is me, humbly bragging, I guess, and I hate it, but I'm the first person to say it was a team effort, right? Or don't thank me, thank the team, right? And I always thank my team. I thank them at the end of a week. I thank them at the end of a long day. I thank them for putting in the effort, because even though some of us, myself included, might say I don't need a pat on the back, right? It does feel good to be acknowledged for the things that you contribute, and for your manager to be the first person to, without prompting, be like, hey, hell of a day. You really nailed it. Great work today. Let's get back at it in the morning. Or, gang, what a hell of a week. Go enjoy the weekend. We'll pick this up on Monday. Whatever it is, right? And then just socially connecting, I think, is super important, especially in this age of, so much remote work. We don't get to, stand around the office and chit chat or bounce ideas off of each other because we're afraid we're going to step on each other's toes over the Zoom call or whatever we're on. People are, digitally raising their hands to speak next. Like, it changes the social interactions that we have, which isn't a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. I love working from home, but you have to make sure as a manager, you're giving your team the space to engage in that way, right? In a way that's comfortable and safe and feels good, that we can talk to each other, right? So, popping on a call and being like, hey, did you guys watch that new Disney Plus show? Or, gosh, we could see the Northern Lights last night, and like my team was all abuzz about it today, right? Like, it's just little, like, sharing personal moments and not forgetting that we're all human and we're all people and we all kind of just need that connection, you know? So I think, like, those are things that we can't set aside because of the work, right? And we can't let the work consume us as managers to not give enough time to acknowledge all this. It's so easy to look up on a Thursday, afternoon and be like, "Oh my gosh, I barely touched base with my team this week." Right? Like, that's no good, right? Like, create create those touch points. They are one of the top priorities for me every day, Every day you got to make that time to make sure they feel supported and mean it. And mean it.
Yeah, you said something I thought that was really super cool about keeping your team connected. And I also really like what you said about being vulnerable. And I think it keeps things human. It helps you stay connected on an emotional level. And there are cultures where staying connected on a cultural, or I'm sorry, an emotional level is just not as important. But I think for creatives, that tends to be a little bit more prevalent. Like, I think creatives do want to stay connected in a remote environment because we're used to getting together in a room and doing some constructive criticism together, and like bouncing ideas off of each other. And in a remote environment, you don't have that. Also, it's a little bit harder to stay connected to your team, where I think that, you're talking about touch points. You do have to be more proactive and intentional about making sure that you are making the team a priority, and that you're making staying connected a priority. So that's awesome that you're doing that, and that it's so important. And I appreciate you coming on here and talking about that, because I think that more people, especially in a world where we're driven so much by the bottom line, especially in marketing and advertising, I think that we need to talk about this more in our industry.
You had mentioned sometimes we get caught up by, like, the notion of the bottom line, right? And I think that it's important to note, right? that, yeah, right? Like that's how we keep the lights on, right? It's how, we as creative support, the sales teams or the clients or whatever, and how they pay, so that we can come home and keep a roof over our heads and food in our stomachs and enjoy life, right? I I think that's where the balance is, being as authentic as possible, being vulnerable, supporting your team, and saying, okay, like where is the gray space for us to push and pull, right? You know, 9 times out of 10, we follow the process. Everything's hunky dory. Every once in a while, something comes screaming in the door. You've got, a week or less to get it done. And everyone, comes together to make that thing happen. But something I've found is that the more connected, the more supported a team feels by their senior staff, the more likely they're going to jump on that fire drill and crush it. And they're going to get it done. And they're not going to, kicking and screaming the whole way. They're like, you know what? This doesn't happen all the time. And, this came in and we get it because that's how right. So it's about understanding that give and take and that balance that exists in the world. No, because we have to recognize the truths, right? But we can't let the notion of sacrificing our humanity be the thing that we decide to let go of, right? If anything else, that's the last thing that we should be letting go of. So that's all I wanted to add to that idea.
Oh man, well, I think that's absolutely great, and I think you touched on a lot of things that I think are swirling in my mind while you're talking because I'm just like, yes, I think our employees should have autonomy and encouragement and support, and I think that what you're saying is essentially if I can get my thoughts arranged in my head, but um, well, sorry, backtracking to something else, but I think that one of the reasons why that works is because you've earned the trust of your employees. And I think that that doesn't come without you making sacrifices as a manager and making intentional choices and working really hard to help your employees feel like they have or they're empowered or they have the ability to do great things with the work, come together in the 11th hour and build out this huge, awesome project. They do that because you've earned their loyalty and their trust, and they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of energy, extra energy to get this stuff done. Anyway, I would say with that, that I think that you, just by you talking here, I think there are going to be people that are going to be saying, "Hey, Nick, can I come work for you?" Because I think that's awesome. And I think it speaks to your value system and what you're willing to put energy into in order to make these things work. It's just it's a philosophy that I think is very modern, but I'm worried that is going by the wayside for again the bottom line that I mentioned before. Okay, I have another question for you. How do you cope with burnout? Your own burnout, and how do you help your team members cope with burnout?
Yeah, that's the question, right? For anyone, not just creatives. In today's day and age, it seems like we're all coping with it more and more. So it's funny, right? I can see burnout in other people a lot easier than I can see it in myself. And so, I'm the first one to go, hey, you look a little stressed. Let's talk about your workload. And maybe there's some things that can shuffle, or maybe I can take something, or I can resource it differently, whatever it is. And sometimes when that can't happen, maybe it's, hey, I know that you're overwhelmed. Try and get offline early today. Or is there anything I can do to help? Like, do you just want to talk about it? Because sometimes it's not just the professional side that's causing that burnout, right? And sometimes, we just need to vent to each other a little bit. So, in the realm of making sure that safe space exists, it's about making sure that we're listening, and we're making folks feel supported, and trying to give folks time, right? I think creatives are we're some of the first people who will put in far too much effort on work because we are pouring a piece of ourselves into it. And And so, we're going to sacrifice our well-being for the thing that we're creating. And to have someone stop us and be like, you know what, I think that you're all done for today. Like, let's pick this up tomorrow and figure out where to go from there is helpful. My own burnout, I'm the I'm the worst when it comes to my own burnout, because I recognize it, but I also think that I'm somehow stronger than it, and I lose every time. Right? This is just my own inability to slow down and stop myself. But I think especially more recently, what I've been doing is creating higher strength in my time management skills. So my existing manager and I have had a lot of conversations about making sure that, like, I'm a well-resourced individual, right? Because that is a huge contributing factor to burnout. Is if you're being pulled in 10 different directions, before you know it, the day's over and you feel like you've got nothing done, right? So managing your time, I think, is a huge, huge piece of it. And then I think just knowing when to step away, right? Like, knowing that whatever's happening is in fact just work, and that, hey, maybe I need to go for a walk, or maybe I just need to go, grab a snack, or just step away for a minute, or whatever it is, right? Create that space for yourself so you can kind of decompress, right? Like, there are so many variables that can contribute to burnout and just contribute to daily stress that we don't even like think about, right? There's so many like subconscious builders, and our conscious brain is over here like, no, 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 we're fine, we can work through this. Listen, I don't care how intelligent or high functioning we think we are as a species, we're still a bunch of animals, and we have to acknowledge that from a physiological standpoint, we can't push ourselves to an absolute max, right? That we have to take time, and so you take 2 minutes, come back fresh, right? Shift gears, know when to raise your hand and go, this is too much. They're all really important things that we can work towards, and again, it means that you have to be comfortable enough with your team, right? If you have a manager who isn't supporting you, who doesn't care for your vulnerabilities, who, is more focused on, the delivery of the thing, right? Then you don't feel comfortable enough to go, hey, I need help, right? Because for you, that's perceived as weakness. But it's not weakness. It's humanity. And the more that we, I think, recognize that, the more I think that we're going to find that, we are more connected and more supported, and that we're more productive because of it, that we're getting more things done. I mean, all the changes I've made in the last couple months, and I was on my one-on-one with my boss just the other day, and she's like, is there anything I can help with? Because fall season begets just general sicknesses, right? So I got a kid with the sniffles, a kid with the flu. I caught the sniffles. So like my last couple of weeks were just a bit of a roller coaster, and so she was being super supportive, which I love, right? And I was like, nope, I got it. This is here, and we walked through everything. And she's like, okay. She goes, you've gotten a lot better at juggling, and it's because I've been putting these systems into practice that I've been able to have better control over my day and my week, which then reduces my level of burnout. So all these things play into it, and we have to make time. We have to make that time.
Well, let me ask you this, because it's about time to wrap up here, but do you have any advice for anyone who's struggling with maybe burnout, or maybe, I'm sorry, we've already answered that question, but do you have advice for anyone who's struggling with self-doubt? Creatives who maybe feel like, I'm never going to make it in this industry. I can never do this. I'm not going to be good at this job. They're maybe like a little bit early on in their tenure, maybe a little bit less experienced. Do you have anything to say to folks who are dealing with those kind of struggles right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say everyone scooch closer to your screen. Ready? We all feel that way. It's totally normal. Self doubt is a beautiful thing. This is something that I say to my kids, right? So we have 4 kids. The older 2 are 10 and 8, right? And so they come home and they're like, this happened at school, or they did an assignment, but they're like, I know I could have done better. Like this isn't good. This is not good, right? That is wonderful. Like that's a gift to be able to acknowledge that the thing that you made could be better, that you could be better, because that means that you are approaching the world with a learning mentality. That means that you are looking at everything through the lens of how can I be better, right? And that is going to net you more success in my mind than somebody who has an ego so big they can't come through the door because they think that they've XYZ, right? Something I probably could have mentioned earlier, is something that I learned a long time ago from a career director, which is you are only as good as the last thing you made, right? Which means if you've had 5 successes and then this sixth thing you do is ain't that great, no one's remembering you for the 5 successes, right? They are like, oh, that last thing that they did wasn't all that great, right? So look at, I think it's fair to say that we're never going to be perfect all the time, and that you don't want to track yourself in a success measure pattern in that way. But the big takeaway there is that it's not about the fact that you have self-doubt now, right? It's about the fact that you want to get better at your craft, and that you are actively seeking mentorship and educational tools and whatever it is to push yourself. And I would say keep doing that, right? Like that's a gift that will keep giving to you over and over again. It's one of the first things I talk about in an interview process, right? Is that I am a forever learner, right? I love to self-educate, right? Keep me up to date on trends. Let me know, about because I always think that I suck. Always. Self-doubt has followed me my entire life, and I'm sure it will continue to do so. And so when someone says, "Wow, Nick, great job," I'm like, I don't know. Like that could have been better, right? Or there are better ideas out there, right? Like that self-doubt will haunt me. That's fine, right? Like I've learned to use it as a tool and not make it feel like a hindrance, because it's not. And don't you dare for 2 seconds think that it is. So, you feeling self-doubt, good. It's your best friend. That's how I feel about self-doubt, and I hope that folks, if they hear nothing else from this interview, I hope that they hear that, because that's so important, right? Is that we have this feeling of fake until you make it, right? I'm not good enough to be in that room. Well, geez, everything we've talked about today is about not being the best in the room, right? It's about contributing to the thing. So do your best, contribute, learn from those around you, surround yourself with smart people, surround yourself with creative people, read everything you can get your hands on, watch videos, right? Small anecdote, just building on that. We were down visiting family in Florida, and my nephew was sitting on the couch watching something on his phone. And I said, "Oh, what are you watching?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm watching an unboxing video." And I was like, "What?" Right? And he's like, "Yeah, it's just this kid unboxing a thing." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "That's fine, right? Like we all need time to decompress and whatever." I said, "But I just want to say that I'm going to old man myself for a second, right?" And I said, "When I was your age, I had to bike myself to the library with a list of thoughts and ideas that I had, and then I had to peruse the library in an effort to find any level of resources that would support that, right? And I would dive headfirst into it. We have so many resources at our disposal because of the internet, and the propensity for somebody who wants to learn something, that bar is low, gang. That bar is low. So go learn. Go watch a TED talk. Google it. You're gonna get hits, right? Like dive headfirst into what it is you want to know about, and you're gonna come out of that knowing more than you did when you went in. You know, so yeah, let self doubt exist. It's an important piece of who we are.
Well, that's great advice. This has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and I think everybody's going to get a lot out of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully share, what's inside this noggin of mine with anybody who checks this out.